Ambassador Crystal stood at the observation window of the Galactic Council station and watched the human transport ship dock. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The ship was old, very old. It had burn marks on its hull and patches where repairs had been made with different metals. By all logic, this ship should not still be flying. Yet here it was. "The Terrans have arrived," said his assistant, a small being named Veth who belonged to the Minari species. Veth's voice shook slightly. "They brought only one ship." "One ship," Crystal turned all 4 eyes toward Veth. "We requested a full diplomatic envoy. We are asking them to join the coalition war against the Draxar. They send one ship." "Yes, Ambassador, one ship with 47 warriors." Crystal made a sound of disgust. The Draxar were coming. Everyone knew this. The insect-like conquerors had already taken 17 systems. They moved through space like a plague, eating everything in their path. The Galactic Council had finally agreed that all species must work together or die alone. The humans were new to the galactic stage. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 20 standard years ago. They were small, weak, and short-lived. But they had survived first contact with the Vorathi raiders, and that had surprised everyone. The Council thought perhaps these strange, soft beings might have something to offer. Now Crystal was not so sure. He made his way to the docking bay with Veth following close behind. Several other Council representatives were already there. There was General Thornax of the Kelthari, a massive reptilian being who stood 3 meters tall and had scales hard as ship armor. There was Admiral Yenix of the Florin Collective, a being made mostly of crystalline structures that sang when she moved. And there was Observer Null, who represented the mechanical consensus and spoke for the artificial minds that watched over 1,000 worlds. The airlock opened with a hiss. Crystal had studied humans. He had read their biological data. He knew they were carbon-based, oxygen-breathing, and remarkably fragile compared to most spacefaring species. Their bones broke easily. Their skin tore with little force. They could not survive in vacuum for more than a few moments. They could not regenerate limbs. They lived for less than a standard century. What stepped out of that airlock did not match his data. The first human through the door was a female. She was small by galactic standards, barely reaching Crystal's shoulder. Her skin was dark brown, and her hair was cut very short. She wore simple gray clothing with no armor at all, but the way she moved made Crystal's danger instincts wake up. She moved like a predator. Behind her came more humans, male and female, with skin in many different colors and bodies in many different shapes. Some were tall and some were short. Some were thick with muscle and some were thin and wiry. None of them wore armor. None of them carried visible weapons. But they all moved the same way, alert, ready, alive in a way that made the air feel heavy. "I am Captain Sarah Chen," the first human said. Her voice was calm and clear. "Terran Defense Force, 7th Strike Battalion, we answer the Council's call." General Thornax stepped forward. His massive form towered over the human captain. He was used to smaller beings showing fear. They always did. Captain Chen looked up at him and smiled. "You bring 47 soldiers," Thornax said. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "The Draxar have millions. What can 47 soft-bodied humans do against such numbers?" "Respectfully, General," Chen replied, "we can win." Thornax laughed. It was not a kind laugh. The arrogance of young species. You have never faced the Draxar. You do not know what war truly is. "We know war." Chen's smile did not fade, but something in her eyes changed. Crystal saw it and felt cold. "Humans have been fighting wars since before we climbed down from the trees. We have been killing each other for 10,000 years. We are very, very good at it." "You fight among yourselves?" Admiral Yenix asked, her crystalline form chiming with confusion. "Why?" "Because we are human," Chen said simply, "and because fighting made us strong." Observer Null spoke, its mechanical voice flat and emotionless. Our data indicates that humans have a history of extreme violence. However, your technology is inferior. Your biology is weak. Your numbers are small. Logic suggests you cannot contribute meaningfully to this conflict. Logic, Chen repeated. She turned to look at her soldiers. They stood in perfect formation, completely still but somehow radiating energy. Tell me, Observer, does your logic account for fighting spirit? Define this term. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she walked toward one of her soldiers, a young man with pale skin and red hair. He looked barely old enough to be called an adult by human standards. Private Tours, she said. How many rounds did you fire during the Battle of Proxima Station? 3,207, Captain. How many enemies did you kill? 134 confirmed, Captain. And what were you thinking during that battle? The young human's jaw tightened. His eyes went distant, seeing something far away. I was thinking about my little sister, Captain. I was thinking that if I died, there would be no one left to protect her, so I decided I would not die. You decided, Chen repeated. She turned back to the council representatives. Fighting spirit is this. It is the decision to win, not the hope, not the wish, the decision. When a human decides they will not lose, something changes in them. They become more than their biology, more than their training, more than the sum of their parts. This is not logical, Observer Null said. No, Chen agreed. It is not, but it is real. Crystal stepped forward. He had been silent, watching and listening. Now he asked the question that burned in his mind. Can you teach this thing, this fighting spirit? Chen looked at him with those strange human eyes. They were brown and warm, but beneath that warmth was something old and dangerous. No, she said. Fighting spirit cannot be taught, it must be found. Each warrior must find it within themselves in the moment when everything seems lost, when death is certain, when all hope is gone. She paused. That is when humans become truly dangerous, when we have nothing left to lose. I do not understand, Crystal admitted. You will, Chen said. When the Draxar come, you will understand. She was right. The first Draxar attack came 3 weeks later. Crystal was in the command center of the Coalition flagship when the alarm started screaming. His 4 eyes jumped between screens, trying to process the incoming data. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace all around them. Hundreds of ships, then thousands. They found us, Admiral Yenix said, her crystalline form flickering with fear. How did they find us? It does not matter, General Thornex growled. What matters is that we fight. The battle began. Crystal had never seen such destruction. The Draxar ships were ugly things, all angles and spikes, designed to inspire terror. They swarmed like the insects that piloted them, moving in patterns that were hard to predict. Coalition ships exploded one after another. The beautiful crystalline vessels of the Florin shattered. The mighty warships of the Kelthari burned. The human ship, that old patched thing, flew straight into the heart of the Draxar formation. What are they doing? Crystal shouted. They will be destroyed. On the communication screen, he could see Captain Chen on her bridge. Alarms were blaring. Sparks flew from damaged systems. One of her crew members was bleeding from a head wound, but still working their station. Chen was smiling. All hands, she said into her communicator, this is the captain. Remember what we fight for, remember who we are. We are human. We do not surrender, we do not give up, we do not die easily. Her voice rose. Give them hell. What happened next would stay in Crystal's memory forever. The human ship began doing things that should have been impossible. It twisted and rolled through enemy fire in ways that would kill any normal crew. The G-forces alone should have crushed every human on board. But they kept fighting. They kept firing. And they kept screaming. It was not a scream of fear. Crystal knew that sound well. This was something else. It was a battle cry, a roar of defiance. Through the communication channel, he could hear 47 human voices raised in fury, calling out challenges to an enemy that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. The human ship destroyed 37 Draxar vessels before it was finally forced to retreat. 37. General Thornax, whose own flagship had destroyed only 12, stared at the tactical display with his jaw hanging open. "What are they?" he whispered. Crystal did not answer. He was watching the human ship limp back toward the fleet. It was burning. Whole sections had been torn away. By every measure, it should have been a dead hulk drifting in space. But it was still flying. And on the bridge, Captain Sarah Chen was still smiling. The Terran warriors set up their base of operations in a cargo bay that the Coalition had offered them. It was not a comfortable space. The walls were bare metal, and the air recyclers made a constant humming noise, but the humans did not seem to mind. Crystal went to visit them on the third day after the battle. He told himself it was his diplomatic duty to check on all Coalition forces, but he knew the truth. He was curious. He needed to understand. What he found in that cargo bay made him stop in the doorway. The humans were training. This was not strange by itself. All warriors trained. The Kelthari practiced combat forms. The Floran harmonized their crystalline structures for better coordination. Even the mechanical minds of the consensus ran simulations. But the humans trained differently. 2 of them were fighting each other in an open area while others watched. They wore no armor, no padding, nothing to protect them. They struck each other with fists and feet. They threw each other to the ground. They applied holds that bent joints in painful ways. And they were not pretending. Crystal could see blood. He could hear the impact of flesh on flesh. He could smell the sweat and the copper tang of injury. "Ambassador," said a voice beside him. Crystal turned to find one of the human soldiers standing nearby. It was the young one from before, Private Tors. Up close, Crystal could see scars on his hands and a healed break in his nose. "Are you looking for the captain?" "I am looking for understanding," Crystal said honestly. "Why do your warriors hurt each other? Are they enemies?" Tors laughed. It was a warm sound, not mocking. "No, sir, they're best friends. They're just sparring, training." "But they are causing real damage. I can see blood." "Yes, sir, that's the point." Crystal's 4 eyes all focused on the young human. "Explain this to me. I do not understand." Tors thought for a moment. Then he gestured for Crystal to follow him to a quieter corner of the bay. They sat on crates of supplies, and the human began to speak. "Where I come from, there's a saying. You can't learn to swim without getting in the water. You can't learn to fight without getting hit." He touched his broken nose. "Pain is a teacher, the best teacher, maybe. When you train without real consequences, you don't learn how to keep going when things hurt, but real fights always hurt. Your people practice hurting each other so they can endure pain in actual combat." "That's part of it, yeah, but there's more to it." Tors leaned forward. "When I hit my friend and she hits me back, we're not just learning technique, we're learning trust. I trust her not to really hurt me, not to go too far. She trusts me the same way. That trust carries over to the battlefield. When we fight together, we know each other. We know what we can take. We know our limits and how to push past them." "Push past limits," Crystal repeated. "This is related to the fighting spirit Captain Chen spoke of." Tors nodded. "Fighting spirit isn't magic, Ambassador. It's not some supernatural power. It's training, it's conditioning. It's teaching your mind and body that pain isn't the end of everything. That exhaustion can be overcome. That fear can be controlled." He smiled slightly. "Every human warrior has a box inside them, a box where they keep their reserves. The thing they only open when everything else has failed. Fighting spirit is learning how to open that box." "What is in this box?" The young human was quiet for a long moment. His eyes went to the 2 fighters in the center of the bay. One had just thrown the other to the ground and was now helping them up. They were both grinning despite the bruises forming on their faces. Everything, Tors finally said. All the love we have, all the hate, all the fear and hope and desperation. Humans, we feel things strongly, Ambassador, maybe too strongly sometimes. We love hard, we hate hard, we grieve hard. And when we fight, when we really fight, we put all of that into it. Every punch is thrown with the memory of everyone we've ever loved. Every bullet fired carries the weight of everything we're trying to protect. Crystal processed this information. It was strange, emotional, not logical at all. But he thought about the battle. He thought about the human ship flying into certain death and coming out the other side. He thought about 47 humans screaming their defiance at 1,000 enemy vessels. You weaponize your emotions, he said slowly. Tors grinned. Now you're getting it. Captain Chen found him an hour later, still sitting in the cargo bay and watching her soldiers train. She sat down beside him without asking permission, which Crystal found refreshingly direct. Private Tors says you've been asking questions, she said. I am trying to understand your people, Captain. The more I learn, the more confused I become. Chen laughed. That's fair. We confuse ourselves sometimes. She watched her soldiers with obvious pride. You know, back on Earth, we have a lot of different martial traditions, ways of fighting that were developed over thousands of years. Each one has its own philosophy, its own approach to combat. Different species of humans develop different fighting styles. Not different species. We're all human, but different cultures, different environments, different needs. The people who lived in mountains fought differently than the people who lived by the sea. The warriors who had to defend their homes fought differently than the warriors who went out to conquer. Crystal considered this. Among my people there is only one way of fighting, the correct way. All other methods are considered inferior and are not taught. That's efficient, Chen acknowledged. But efficiency isn't everything. The thing about having many different fighting styles is that we're unpredictable. No enemy can study how humans fight because there's no single answer. Some of us grapple, some of us strike, some of us use weapons, some of us fight with our minds as much as our bodies. You said minds, fighting with minds. Chen tapped her temple. War isn't just physical, Ambassador. The best warriors throughout human history knew this. Sun Tzu wrote about it thousands of years ago. Know yourself, know your enemy, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles. A lot of fighting happens before any blows are exchanged. Positioning, psychology, making your enemy afraid, making them doubt themselves. The Draxar do not feel fear, Crystal said. Their intelligence records indicate they have no concept of self-preservation. They fight until they die or until they win. Everyone feels fear, Chen said quietly, even if they don't recognize it as such, even if it's just a hesitation, a moment of uncertainty, a tiny voice wondering if maybe this isn't worth it. Her eyes met his. We'll find their fear, Ambassador. We're very good at finding what people are afraid of. Crystal felt a chill run through his body. There was something in Chen's voice that made him believe her absolutely. You are a frightening species, Captain. Thank you, she said, and she meant it. The Coalition flagship's alarms started screaming again. Round 2 had begun. This attack was worse than the first. The Draxar had learned from their previous failure. They came with more ships, better tactics, and something new, boarding parties. Crystal watched from the command center as the insectoid warriors cut their way into Coalition vessels. The crystalline florin broke like glass under the Draxar mandibles. The scaled Kalthari fought bravely, but were overwhelmed by numbers. Even the mechanical bodies of the consensus forces were torn apart. Then the Draxar boarded the cargo bay, where the humans were stationed. The security feeds showed it all. Crystal watched as the airlock burst open and Draxar warriors poured through. They were terrifying things, 2 meters tall with 6 limbs and chitin armor that could stop most projectiles. Their mandibles dripped with paralytic venom. Their compound eyes saw in spectrums that most species could not. The first Draxar through the door died before it knew what was happening. A human hand grabbed its head and twisted. There was a crack, and the insectoid body fell. Private Tor stood over it, already moving to the next enemy. Crystal had never seen anything like what followed. The humans did not fight like soldiers. They did not fight like the warriors he knew. They fought like something older, something primal. They used everything as a weapon: cargo crates, tools, pieces of broken metal. One human grabbed a Draxar by its antenna and slammed it into the wall repeatedly until it stopped moving. Another used her bare hands to crack open a Draxar's chest plate and reached inside. And through it all they were screaming. That sound, that terrible, beautiful sound of human rage. Captain Chen was at the center of it. She moved through the enemy like water through rocks, flowing around attacks, striking at weak points, never stopping. A Draxar claw caught her arm, tearing through flesh to bone. She did not stop. She used her other hand to break the Draxar's limb, took its own claw, and used it to kill 3 more enemies before the blood loss finally forced her to her knees. Even then, kneeling in a pool of her own blood, she grabbed a Draxar's leg and bit through its joint. She bit it. The remaining Draxar froze. For just a moment, just a heartbeat, but it was enough. In that moment of hesitation, the other humans surged forward. The battle became a slaughter. Within 3 minutes, every Draxar in the cargo bay was dead. Crystal stared at the security feed. His 4 eyes could not blink. His mind could not process what he had seen. 47 humans had killed over 200 Draxar in hand-to-hand combat. They had taken injuries that would have incapacitated any other species, and they were still standing. Mostly. Captain Chen collapsed as the last enemy fell. Her soldiers surrounded her, applying pressure to her wounds, calling for medical help. Crystal could see their faces on the feed. They were crying, laughing, hugging each other. One of them was vomiting in a corner. They were broken and bloody and barely alive. And they had won. Observer Null appeared beside Crystal. The mechanical being had been silent throughout the battle, processing data. "I have analyzed the combat footage," Null said. "I have cross-referenced it with all known fighting styles in the Galactic database. I have run probability simulations based on the physical capabilities of human biology." The machine paused. The outcome should have been impossible. The humans should have died within the first 30 seconds. They were outmatched in every measurable category. "Yet they won," Crystal said. "Yes, they won." Null's visual sensors flickered. "I have added a new variable to my calculations, an unmeasurable factor. I am calling it fighting spirit as the humans do. I do not understand this factor. I cannot quantify it, but I can no longer deny that it exists." Crystal nodded slowly. "None of us can deny it now." Down in the cargo bay, the human soldiers had stabilized Captain Chen. She was conscious again, refusing to be carried, walking on her own feet despite the blood loss. Her arm hung useless at her side, but she was giving orders, organizing her people, already thinking about the next battle. General Thornax's voice came through the command center speakers. The great Kelthari warrior sounded different than before. The arrogance was gone from his voice. "Coalition forces," he said. "The Draxar are retreating. They are fleeing." Crystal looked at the tactical display. It was true. The thousands of Draxar ships were pulling back, breaking formation, running away. The Draxar did not retreat. Everyone knew this. They fought until victory or death. They never ran. Until now. "They saw," Admiral Yenix said, her crystalline form chiming with wonder. "They saw what the humans did, the broadcast. It went out on open channels. The Draxar saw." Crystal understood then. The Draxar had looked at the humans and seen something that terrified them. Not superior numbers, not better technology, not anything that made logical sense. They had seen creatures that simply refused to die, that kept fighting after they should have stopped, that used their own blood and broken bones as weapons. They had seen fighting spirit. And for the first time in recorded history, the Draxar were afraid. The news spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Within days, every species in the coalition had seen the footage from the cargo bay battle. They watched Captain Chen bite through a Draxar's leg. They watched Private Tors rip an enemy apart with his bare hands. They watched humans take wounds that would kill any other being and keep fighting. The reactions were mixed. Some species were horrified. The Selnari, a peaceful people who had evolved without predators, formally requested that humans be banned from their systems. They said that watching the battle footage had caused psychological damage to their youth. Others were fascinated. The Kelthari, who had always prided themselves on being the galaxy's greatest warriors, began studying human fighting techniques. General Thornax himself requested permission to train with the Terran soldiers. The Mechanical Consensus rewrote their core combat protocols to include a new directive: never underestimate biological determination. And the Draxar did something unprecedented. They sent a message. Crystal was in the council chamber when it arrived. The Draxar had never communicated before. They had never needed to. They simply conquered. They took what they wanted and killed anything that resisted. But now, for the first time, they wanted to talk. The message was translated by Observer Null. The human things are not food, they are wrong life. They do not break when they should break. They do not die when they should die. The swarm will not consume wrong life. The swarm will go elsewhere. This is warning. Do not bring wrong life to swarm space. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Species were shouting over each other, trying to understand what this meant. Had the Draxar just surrendered? Had they called a truce? Were they offering peace? Captain Chen was there, her arm still in a regeneration cast. She listened to the message with a strange expression on her face. "They're afraid," she said quietly. "They've never faced anything like us. They don't know how to process it." "Will they leave us alone?" Crystal asked. "Will they stop attacking?" Chen shook her head. "Not forever. Fear fades. Memories get short. They'll come back eventually when they've convinced themselves that what they saw wasn't real, that we're just another species to consume." She looked at the council representatives around her. "But we've bought time, and we've shown them something important." "What have you shown them?" Admiral Yenix asked. "That there are some things you can't just eat, some enemies you can't just overwhelm with numbers, some fights that aren't worth the cost." Chen smiled, that smile that Crystal had come to recognize, the Predator's smile. "We've shown them that humans are expensive, and next time they come, we'll make sure the price is even higher." The council voted that day to grant humanity a permanent seat among their ranks. They were no longer the new species, the young ones, the soft-bodied weaklings who had just discovered the stars. They were the species that made the Draxar run. They were the wrong life. And the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. 6 months passed. The Draxar had kept their word, pulling back from several systems they had been threatening. The coalition used the breathing room to rebuild, to strengthen defenses, to prepare for the inevitable return of their enemy. And the humans. The humans did what humans always did. They trained. Crystal made it a habit to visit the human quarters regularly. What had started as diplomatic curiosity had become genuine interest, perhaps even friendship. He found their ways strange, but there was an honesty to them that he appreciated. Today, he found something different. The cargo bay had been transformed. Where once there had been crates and makeshift training areas, there was now a proper gymnasium. Not built by the coalition, but by the humans themselves, using materials they had scrounged and traded for. There were weights and mats and strange devices whose purposes Crystal could not guess. But that was not the strange part. The strange part was the crowd. At least 200 beings from different species had gathered around the training area. Crystal recognized Kelthari warriors, Floran observers, even a few mechanical consensus units. They were all watching with intense focus. In the center of the training area, Captain Chen was teaching. Her arm had healed fully, though it bore new scars. She moved with the same deadly grace as always, but her voice was patient and calm. Fighting spirit is not rage, she was saying. Many species make this mistake. They see humans in battle and think we are simply angry, berserk, out of control. She shook her head. This is wrong. A human warrior in the grip of true fighting spirit is more controlled than ever. Every action is deliberate. Every movement has purpose. One of the Kelthari stepped forward. He was young by their standards, perhaps only 60 years old. Then how do you explain the battle footage, the screaming, the biting? Chen smiled. Those were choices, every one of them. I screamed because screaming releases tension and intimidates enemies. I bit because I had no other weapon available and my teeth could puncture that joint. Everything you saw was training expressing itself under pressure. But the emotions, the Kelthari pressed. We could see the emotions, the anger, the joy. How can you be controlled and emotional at the same time? Because emotions are tools. Chen walked toward the Kelthari, unafraid despite his size. You feel fear, yes, when you face an enemy stronger than yourself. Yes, the Kelthari admitted reluctantly. What do you do with that fear? I try to suppress it, to control it, to push it down. Wrong, Chen poked him in the chest. Fear is energy. It's your body giving you resources, faster heart rate, sharper senses, muscles ready to explode into action. When you suppress fear, you waste all that energy fighting yourself instead of your enemy. Then what should I do? Accept it, welcome it, let it flow through you like electricity. Fear says danger is coming. Good, use that awareness. Fear says you might die. Good, let that make every moment precious. Fear says run away. Good, take that running energy and put it into running toward your enemy instead. Crystal watched as understanding slowly dawned on the Kelthari's face. Around the room, other beings were having similar revelations. You transform your weaknesses into strengths, Crystal said aloud. Chen turned to him and nodded. That's exactly it, Ambassador. Humans aren't the strongest species. We're not the fastest or the toughest or the smartest. We don't have armor or venom or claws. What we have is adaptability, the ability to take whatever we're given and make it work. Even emotions, even fear. Especially those, because emotions are the most powerful force in the universe, Ambassador. They've started wars and ended them. They've built civilizations and torn them down. They've sent humans to the moon and to the stars. She spread her arms to encompass the room full of alien species. And now they're going to save the galaxy. You're teaching them, Crystal realized, teaching other species fighting spirit. Trying to, it's not easy. Every species processes emotions differently. Every culture has different relationships with fear and anger and love. But the core principles are the same. Accept what you feel. Direct it. Use it. One of the Florin chimed a question. Is this why humans fight each other in training, to practice using emotions? Partly, we also do it because we're stupid and we like punching each other. Chen grinned. Don't tell anyone I said that. Laughter rippled through the crowd. It was strange hearing so many different species laugh together. The Kelthari rumbled. The Florin chimed. The mechanical consensus units made clicking sounds that they had apparently decided counted as laughter. And the humans laughed loudest of all. The Draxar returned 3 years later. They came in greater numbers than ever before. 1 million ships darkened the stars. Entire systems fell within the first week. The coalition defenses buckled, then broke, then shattered. But something was different this time. When the Draxar boarded coalition ships, they found resistance they had not expected. Kelthari warriors who no longer fled from fear but channeled it into terrible fury. Florin fighters who had learned to use their fragile bodies in ways that were devastatingly effective. Even mechanical consensus units fought with something that looked almost like passion. And always at the heart of the resistance were the humans. Captain Chen was a general now. She commanded the entire coalition ground force, a position that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. Her strategies were unconventional, emotional, and absolutely effective. When the Draxar tried to starve out a besieged planet, Chen organized a relief mission using ships held together with hope and duct tape. When they tried to use terror tactics, Chen responded with terror tactics of her own, broadcasting footage of what her soldiers did to capture Draxar forces. When they tried to negotiate a surrender, Chen sent back a 3-word response that became legendary across the galaxy. Come and take. The war lasted 7 more years. 7 years of blood and fire and death. 7 years of losses that would have broken any other coalition. 7 years of the Draxar throwing everything they had at the galaxy's defenders. And every year, the defenders fought harder. They had learned, all of them. The Kelthari had incorporated human training methods into their warrior academies. The Florin had developed entirely new combat forms that used their crystalline structures as weapons. The mechanical consensus had created a new designation, emotional combat processor, that they installed in all fighting units. But more than techniques, they had learned the spirit. Crystal saw it in the battles he observed, in the faces of beings who should have given up but didn't. He saw it in the way species that had been strangers learned to trust each other, to fight together, to die together. He saw it in the coalition forces who faced impossible odds and smiled. They had learned how to open the box. The final battle took place in the Draxar home system. 10 years after humanity's first contact with the galaxy, a coalition fleet of 10,000 ships dropped out of hyperspace in orbit around the Draxar homeworld. It was a fraction of what the Draxar had once commanded, but it was enough. Because every being on every ship had fighting spirit. The battle lasted 3 days. It was the most destructive engagement in galactic history. Ships died by the hundreds. Millions of warriors fell on both sides. The void was choked with debris and bodies and the scattered light of dying vessels. General Chen's flagship was hit 19 times. Her crew repaired damage while under fire, fought off boarding parties, and kept fighting when any sane being would have surrendered. Chen herself was wounded twice, but refused to leave the bridge. On the 3rd day, the Draxar Queen broadcast a message. Why? Her voice was translated through 1,000 languages. Why do you not stop? Why do you not die? We have killed so many of you. We have destroyed your ships and burned your worlds and eaten your dead. Why do you keep coming? General Chen answered for the coalition. Because we're human, she said. Then she paused and looked around her bridge at the Kelthari officer bleeding at his station, at the Florin navigator whose crystalline form was cracked but still singing, at the mechanical consensus unit that had lost 3 limbs but was still computing firing solutions. No, she corrected herself. Because we learned to be human, all of us, every species in this fleet. We learned that some things are worth dying for, and we decided that we would not let you win. The Draxar Queen was silent for a long moment. This is madness, she finally said. Yes, Chen agreed. It is, and it's the most powerful force in the universe. The coalition fleet made its final push. Crystal watched from his station on a support vessel as the battle reached its climax. He watched ships ram enemy vessels when their weapons failed. He watched soldiers in environmental suits leap across the void to board Draxar craft. He watched beings of a dozen different species die screaming defiance at an enemy that had once made them cower. And he watched the Draxar break. Not retreat, not withdraw, break. The great swarm that had terrified the galaxy for centuries came apart like a shattered mirror. Ships fled in every direction. The hive mind that had directed them splintered into 1,000 competing voices. The Queen tried to rally them. She tried to restore order, but it was too late. They had seen what the coalition would do, what they would sacrifice, how far they would go, and for the first time in their evolutionary history, the Draxar understood that some victories weren't worth the cost. The war was over. 20 years later, Crystal stood at the observation window of a very different space station. This one was larger than any that had existed during the war. It was the center of a new galactic community, one that included species that had once been enemies. Even the Draxar had a delegation, though they kept to themselves and rarely spoke. The statue in the station's central plaza showed a human figure. It was Captain General, now Ambassador Sarah Chen, cast in eternal metal. She stood with her arms spread wide, one hand open in welcome, the other closed in a fist. The plaque beneath her feet read, "She taught us to fight. She taught us to feel. She taught us that strength comes not from what we are, but from what we decide to be." Chen herself stood beside Crystal, older now, her hair gone gray, her body bearing the scars of a lifetime of war. But her eyes were still those of a predator. Some things never changed. "You hate that statue," Crystal observed. Chen snorted. "I look constipated. Also, I'm way too short. They added at least half a meter." "You are an important figure in galactic history. You deserve recognition." "I don't want recognition. I want a drink and a nap," she sighed. "What I did wasn't special, Ambassador. Any human would have done the same. Any being with fighting spirit would have done the same. But you were the first. You showed us what was possible." Chen was quiet for a moment. Below them, beings of 100 different species moved through the plaza. Some were laughing. Some were arguing. Some were training together in the public exercise areas, practicing fighting forms that combined techniques from a dozen worlds. "You know what I'm most proud of," she finally said. "It's not the battles, it's not the victories, it's this." She gestured at the diverse crowd. "We used to fight each other, Ambassador. Humans, I mean. For thousands of years we killed each other over land and resources and ideas. We were monsters to ourselves. And now we're monsters together," she smiled. "For each other. The whole galaxy became one big family, dysfunctional as hell but still a family. We fight together, we bleed together, and when the next big threat comes, and there will be one, there always is, we'll face it together." "Fighting spirit," Crystal said. "Fighting spirit," Chen agreed. "It was never really about combat. It was about connection, about caring so much for something that you'll do anything to protect it, about deciding that some things matter more than your own survival." A young Kalthari approached them, bowing respectfully. She was barely out of her adolescent molting, but she wore the insignia of a military cadet. "General Chen," she said, her voice shaking with nervousness, "I am sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to thank you. My grandfather served in the war. He told me stories. He said that before he met humans, he did not know what it meant to truly fight. He said you taught him to feel." Chen's expression softened. "What's your name, cadet?" "Vexthal, General." "Vexthal, did your grandfather also tell you about the time he ate an entire Draxar scout because he was too stubborn to admit he was out of ammunition?" The young Kalthari's eyes widened. He did that." "He absolutely did, swallowed it whole and spent 3 days sick as hell. Bravest, stupidest thing I ever saw." Chen put a hand on the cadet's shoulder. "Your grandfather was a good warrior, Vexthal, not because he was strong or fast, because he cared. Remember that. The technique doesn't matter as much as the heart behind it." The cadet saluted and hurried away, looking like she might burst with pride. Crystal watched her go. "You are kind to the young ones." "I'm kind to everyone these days. I've earned it." Chen stretched, her old bones creaking. "Come on, Ambassador. Let's go get that drink. I want to tell you about the time my battalion held a bridge for 3 days using nothing but harsh language and thrown rocks." "You have told me that story 11 times. Then you'll love hearing it for the 12th. They walked together through the plaza, 2 old friends from different worlds. united by something that had once seemed impossible. Behind them, the statue of Chen stood watch over a galaxy that had learned to fight together. Fighting spirit, they called it. But really it was just love, fierce, stubborn, unreasonable love, for life and freedom and each other. And it had changed everything. Far away in the outer reaches of explored space, something stirred. Something vast and ancient, something that had slept since before the stars were young. It felt the change that had swept across the galaxy. It tasted the new energy, the new unity, the new strength. And for the first time in a billion years, it hesitated. Perhaps this galaxy was not worth the trouble after all. Perhaps these beings, these strange, emotional, impossibly stubborn beings, were best left alone. It went back to sleep. And the galaxy finally was at peace.